Hello, I'm Jeff Hayes, CEO of Soundbooth Theater and narrator of Pilgrims by M.R. Leonard. And this is the YouTube edition of the Pilgrims audiobook. If you want to get right to the audiobook, you can skip to 20 minutes on this video. We will be releasing 4 parts of this audiobook weekly, and each one will have a little bonus interview just like this one with different guests. Today, Michael Leonard and I are hanging out with the other actors in this production: Annie Ellicott, who plays the majority of the female cast, Justin Thomas James, who plays Virgil and composed some music, and Gary Furlong, who plays Father Ambrose. All right, so thank you guys for joining. Michael, we'll start with you. How did you find out about Soundbooth Theater, and what made you decide that we should be doing your audiobook?
The legend of Soundbooth Theater and Jeff Hayes is I feel like I can't walk down the street in any major city in the United States and not have people whispering and talking about it at all times. But um, I actually, the way I found you guys is as the author, I really wanted every format of the book to come across excellently. So a lot of focus on the print edition. That's where the writers kind of put their energy. But a lot of people consume books in audio format now, including myself. And audiobooks aren't one size fits all. Some are better than others. And I wanted the best. So I Googled who is the best narrator for audiobooks. And I got a variety of answers, but a lot of them pointed in Soundbooth Theater's direction. Jeff Hayes, a lot of people were mentioning Dungeon Crawler Carl, which I didn't know was a title. At first, I thought it was like a description of like it was maybe some way of describing a great
Like a
narrator.
genre?
Yeah, like
Oh, they're so dungeon crawler, Carl.
they're so Dungeon Crawler Carl. So eventually I realized that was a title, and I learned about the inordinate success of that book and the many fans out there. But I remember reading a Reddit forum that said, if Jeff Hayes was reading an instruction manual for how to paint a wall, I would listen to it. And I said, okay, that's who needs to read my book. So I reached out. I know that you focus on lit RPG. Mine is a sci-fi first contact story with a interesting premise: Catholic aliens arriving on Earth. So it was a little different than your typical fare, but uh, I reached out and we began collaborating after a lot of pressure on my part, and I couldn't be happier with the result. I have the book. My book Pilgrims came out 6 months ago, just about in November of 2024, and many readers have found it via the audio experience. And the amount of feedback I get about how wonderful the performance is in bringing it to life is just so gratifying as an author. And frankly, when I talk to people and tell them what format to get the book, I'm always saying to get the audiobook. It's my favorite version of the book brought to life. So that's how I found you, and I can't say enough good things. And that's why I'm excited to be putting this product onto YouTube so that more people can experience it and enjoy it themselves.
Yeah, us too. And the fact that we focus on lit RPG and not so much on first contact sci-fi. Were you worried at all that maybe we wouldn't be able to pull it off, or that there might be a little bit of growing pains with the production?
No, actually, that made it more appealing. I could tell just by listening to the productions that the range and ability of all of the cast and even just the production itself was next level. And the lit RPG thing was better because I it felt like, wow, I don't think the whole general market has discovered that this is where audiobooks are going yet. And my explanation is that lit RPG hasn't up till that point at least been recognized for kind of the genre that it is and has the loyal fan base that it has. So coming from a business background, that that's what we call alpha. It's an advantage that other people don't see. So I'm like, oh, no wonder Jeff is, someone I could potentially reach out to because he's in this genre area. This is my chance. Like otherwise, I'd be having to go through CAA and some agency who's not even going to give me the time of day because he's such a big shot and no one can even get a hold of him to read his books except former presidents or whatnot to do the audiobooks. So I liked it, and more to the general point, the worlds you have to describe and narrate in lit RPG really push the boundaries of reading.
It was quite a task to accomplish, and I'm very happy with what we have. One of my favorite audiobook projects that we've done. So Annie, you've been working with me at Soundbooth Theater for a long time. You play opposite me on many audiobooks, filling out the female cast much better than I'd been able to do
but not much.
previously myself. I would say it's a market improvement.
Okay, this is a funny anecdote. A while back, Jeff decided that when he did the next Dungeon Crawler Carl book, he was going to give me Princess Donut. And I was like, okay, great. And then he told the fans, and there was like an uproar. Like people like revolted against this. They were like, no one gets to play Princess Donut but Jeff. And I mean, they were right. Like, she's so iconic. Like, she's everybody's favorite character, you know, however many books later. Like, that's one of your most recognizable characters, not only in the audiobook world, but also on your body.
That's
Yeah.
That's correct. Yes. At the time of this recording, I have a fresh new tattoo of Princess Donut on my butt. So, Annie,
Yes.
Can you tell us more about what it's been like over the years and what kind of characters you find yourself playing regularly with Sound Booth Theater?
Oh man, it's just been so fun. I can't believe how many years it's been, honestly. I love jobs, that feel like playing. I mean, who doesn't? I get to play a lot of a really wide variety of characters because of the genre that we work in. I end up playing a lot of witches, a lot of usually the matronly characters go to me. I generally love playing villains just because I'm, have to go around being so polite in regular society. I enjoy variety. So I like playing all those characters, but yeah, I tend to get witches and queens a lot.
Did you feel like the characters in Pilgrims were different in some way to other Sound Booth Theater characters that you were used to playing,
Yeah.
or did these fit right in?
Oh, the Pilgrim characters feel more like real life people, you know. I tried to play them more, a little bit more down to earth than say like a spider queen.
That leads us over to Justin, who plays actually less of a real person in Pilgrims. He plays I don't know if we should call him a robot, or is it spoilers to call him anything else?
It's an alien robot. Just
An alien robot.
Yeah.
Justin Thomas James. Is this a role you often get in audiobooks?
I'll say no. I don't often get the alien robot casting. Usually I get cast as an old man. I don't know why that is, but it's happened more times than I would have expected before I became a narrator. It does make sense in the sense that he's got a very kind of soft, sort of yoga nidra type voice to him, a character to him. He's very melodic and very soft. And I think that that's something that I love to lean into.
Definitely, he was a fan favorite, Justin. A lot of people talk to me about Virgil and specifically the voiceover for him. So you've gotten into a lot of people's brains with your ASMR voice at this point. But he's an alien robot, so he's robotic, but there's also like an element of emotion as well that shines through at various points. How do you
Yeah.
manage to portray that kind of contradiction?
I'd love to say that I put a lot of thought and research into it, but really, like it comes through in the text, and that makes my job so much easier when I can kind of see where the emotion is coming through in the words that you've written. It's easy for me to kind of lean into it a little bit more, and that needle is already threaded, so to speak. So at the beginning of the book, something I loved about him is that he's dropping some wisdom. There were lines where I was just like, I had to stop and just be like, oh man, I like that. I got to remember that. But he would drop these beautiful ways of looking at the world in such a calculated, computational sort of way. And again, that's in the writing. Later on in the book, as the stakes start to evolve and grow, it is written that he is much more emotional about it. And that's all there. It's in the context. It's in the lines themselves. The choices of the words, maybe even that he's actually saying, do become more human, in the sense that there's more of a desperation, there's more of a caring quality, and it's more raw. So it was very natural and easy for me to just kind of follow what you'd written there for me.
Even when it was in Latin. That didn't seem to trouble
Yes.
you too much, which was great for production.
So Latin, I took one Latin course in high school, and it's the course that I remember the most from. We had a teacher who described herself as a dragon named Ms. Van Wow, who was so like fiery. And the first thing she said to us in the class is, by the end of this class, you're going to know how to say the Lord's Prayer in Latin, and you are going to remember it for the rest of your life. And I still do. Pater noster, qui es in caeli, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua sicut in caelo et in terra. Panem nostrem quotidianum da nobis odie, et dimite nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimitimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentationem, sed libera nos a malo.
I can't do that, for the record. As a Catholic author, I can't do that. So well done.
I've been waiting since grade 9 for that moment. And it was so funny when you guys approached me to take on the role of Virgil, and you said that there was going to be Latin and it's Catholic themed. I was like, wow, this is such a perfect, all stars aligning moment of, I did not know that this was going to come in handy for me in my career, but here we are.
I feel like with a name like Miss Van Wow, you have no choice but to become like a super teacher. That's the only thing you can do with that.
It's true. It's true.
This is how a dragon would name itself as a human.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am Van Wow.
I remember struggling for many hours with the Latin in this book. And then when you came in and you're like, oh, da 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 da, that made me feel really good, because I was like, okay, great. This is this is not going to take up too much of Justin's time, and it's going to sound way better than me as Virgil. So you made me not regret at all giving the role up to you. And Justin, also you helped compose and produce a lot of the music.
A lot of the stuff that I'll compose is very fantasy themed. Lord of the Rings style, sweeping orchestral horns and drums and all that epic stuff. But this one was so nuanced and so different that it was a fun challenge to be like, okay, what would an alien choir sound like? And I was immediately, actually, no, I started kind of playing around and just doing some voice stuff. And very quickly during the process, I was reminded of a soundtrack by Andy Hull and Robert McDowell for Swiss Army Man, which is a beautiful soundtrack. The cast, it uses just their vocal stylings, and I believe a good 90% of the actual soundtrack is just them going like ba 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 ba, and it kind of lent itself to that. So you might hear a little bit of that when you get to that point in the book.
I chose Gary to play Father Ambrose because I felt like we needed a certain levity to the character, but I also knew that Gary has the chops to really take a character seriously and deliver really, really gripping and emotional performances. So Gary, how was the experience playing Father Ambrose for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was great because he's like a very comforting character to listen to, and I find him very he was always very open, but did have his beliefs, and I don't know, I just enjoyed playing him. I found him I would like to talk to that person. I would like to meet him, is what I often found when reading through his character. And yeah, I mean, I grew up Irish Catholic. It was just, you go to mass every week, you study for your communion, your confirmation as part of your school curriculum. So there came points where I think at one point I have to sing a part of a mass. And in my head I was like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. I heard it many, many times in my life growing up. So there was a few things that when I was approaching them, just oh, kind of not to the same extent that Justin was with Latin, but I was like, oh, I know this. This is this is familiar to me. I don't practice much at all anymore, but you do it for 16 plus years of your life, like that kind of makes a mark.
Was really helpful actually because obviously most of the readers are not Catholic, they're not Christian. Most people who find my book are just sci-fi fans or they're interested in a new type of story. But the ones that are Catholic, especially when you represent it in the audio form, they're so familiar with the different parts of the mass
Yeah,
and the cadence that it's gonna be like nails on a chalkboard if you do it wrong. So I was really worried with Jeff
absolutely.
because if someone had zero familiarity, it's certainly learnable, but it would just take that much more work. But it helps with that background because you did the doxology and the different parts of the mass. Like I could tell someone who's been to mass, like
From memory.
and the readers who listen, it doesn't take them out of the story because if someone just pronounces it with the wrong rhythm, they're gonna be like, oh, like
Mm.
we're not at church anymore. And so it was just so helpful that you could bring that to the production. How did you choose Father Ambrose's accent? I've always wanted to know because it just came out perfect.
I think the brief was written down that he had like a mid-Atlantic or transatlantic accent. And so I think I discovered early on when I try to do that accent, especially if I'm doing like, say, a Judy Garland impression, so I'll start to do it, but then I sound like Mickey Mouse. And so it was very much, don't do that.
Yeah, not how I envisioned the character.
After university, I went to live in Japan among a whole ton of different people like New Zealand, Australia, America, the UK. And so my own accent got a little bit muddled. So, like, yes, I think I sound Irish or Minnesotan, but I think when people listen to my accent, sometimes might be a little bit like, what accent is that? And I think that might have transferred over a little bit into Ambrose, that he's, in my head, has talked to a lot of different people, has probably invested himself in a lot of different cultures. And so while it's an American accent, it's there's just something a little bit like, oh, every now and then you're just like, that's a bit of a strangey. And so in my head, it's because he's been influenced by the amount of people he's probably met and talked to, and it has had little like what's the word, like influences on how he might speak and how his accent goes.
Yeah, one thing I really like about this book is how it makes me reconsider the Catholic angle, the Christian angle. I feel like it does a really good job of advocating for Catholicism without saying this is the answer, right? It leaves it relatively open-ended, and you're still questioning what's going on at the end.
One of the exciting things to do kind of as an author, especially with first contact stories as a subgenre, is they kind of hold a mirror up to things that are very familiar to all of us, and you get to see it from a new perspective. So I don't know why there hasn't been a sci-fi book that did this specifically with Catholics or Christianity, I guess more broadly. But I think a lot of people can appreciate the book, whether they have a Catholic background or not, uh, because the aliens come and you're kind of forced to look at this thing that you're either familiar with from your background or you just are familiar with by living in the West and just being around a certain thing. And to kind of see it from a new angle is really intriguing for a lot of people. It's either something they haven't thought much about, or they haven't thought much about in a long time, or they hadn't considered it from that perspective. So it does kind of lend itself to opening people's perspectives up. It doesn't necessarily force any conclusions, but I wasn't sure if the readers would react negatively to that or positively, but the response has been overwhelmingly positive. Again, most of my readers are not religious at all. So that's been really gratifying as an author.
Michael, considering this is the first part of the book and we are introducing people to Pilgrims in this way with the YouTube edition of the audiobook, do you have anything else you want to say to the audience before they get started?
Sit back, relax, and enjoy. It's not what you expect it to be. You will be surprised. This is an original piece of fiction.
Thank you for that. And everyone who's listening on YouTube, remember, we are releasing these weekly. So next Monday, part 2 will be available. But if you can't wait for us to release this in 4 parts on YouTube, you can always go to soundbooth.app and pick it up from us there. And we'll have in the description of this YouTube video a code that you can use to get a discount. So, all right, everybody, welcome to Pilgrims by M.R. Leonard. Happy listening. Sound Booth Theater presents Pilgrims, written by M.R. Leonard, featuring Annie Ellicott as Secretary Ramirez, Lieutenant Wu, and Claire, Gary Francis Furlong as Father Ambrose, and Justin Thomas James as Virgil. Narrated by Jeff Hayes. Prologue. Saint Innocent of Riyadh.
Great art thou, O Lord, and greatly to be praised, who, in thy power and in thy infinite wisdom, hast created me, but a particle of thy creation, to humbly extend thy mercy into this hospital, that, through thy perfect will, I might save these children from the killer robots, slow the alien hand of death wreaking destruction across the land.
The lights flickered as the hospital backup generator began to give way. Jumping over dead bodies, Monsignor Innocenti raced down the hallway to the hospital nursery, the infant squirming in his right arm. A lone doctor stood inside the nursery, a group of school-aged children trembling behind him, the first survivors the Monsignor had seen in far too long. Between him and the innocents was a killer machine, its spider-like body arched back, poised to launch itself through the tempered glass of the nursery door. Ignoring the pain that radiated up his left arm toward his chest, the Monsignor focused on the machine. He raced to close the distance, but before he could reach it, the machine burst through, landing inside the nursery in a rain of glass.
I beseech thee, O Lord, commend my failing body into the nursery, that I may grab the killer machine and cast it back into the corridor, so that the people inside might be saved.
Monsignor Innocenti stepped through the now shattered nursery door, glass crunching beneath his feet. The machine was getting back up, preparing to strike. Tucking the child closer to his chest, the Monsignor reached for the machine with his left hand, praying the crushing pain in his chest would not make his aim any less true. Before the machine could fully rise, the Monsignor grabbed it and threw it back into the hall.
I praise thee, O Lord, who has graced me with swiftness, that thou hast heard my entreaties, delivered me to these innocents, in the hope that they may be saved. You're alive?
Like many men in Saudi Arabia, the doctor spoke English with a British accent. Huddled behind him were a dozen young children and perhaps a dozen more newborns, crying in their bassinets.
The machines will not harm me,
the Monsignor said in his heavily accented English. Grabbing fresh linens from an empty bassinet, he threw them onto the ground at the foot of the nursery door.
Because you're a priest?
The doctor asked, his eyes focused on the Monsignor's Roman collar.
See.
Monsignor Innocenti placed the infant on top of the sheets, arcs of pain shooting down his left arm from his chest.
O Lord, who in thy providence had me find this child along the road to administer thy sacramental mercy unto him, if I may beseech thee further, let the child be as a holy wall, let him keep the wicked machines at bay outside the nursery until I can administer thy salvation to the souls whom thou hast spared in this room. What are you doing? The doctor asked. Those things will be back in here any second. They'll kill the baby. The child will protect us.
Leaving the infant, the Monsignor limped to a sink on the far wall and turned on the tap, letting the water run until it was cool and clear.
Protect us!
The doctor held out his arms as the children quivered behind him.
How? The child has a halo of protection. The machines will not bring him harm, nor will they dare cross a threshold he lies at.
The doctor tilted his head, no understanding on his face.
I can save the other children,
the Monsignor pressed.
Make it so the machines will not hurt them either.
The doctor looked at him skeptically, seemingly unwilling to trust the priest. But his gaze was broken by a child's shriek. 4 more machines had gathered at the entrance, their small metal bodies motionless, their spindly legs gripping the door jamb like spiders in weight.
O Lord, who created earth and stone through thy all-loving dominion, Turn these machines to stone now. Keep them still, if only for a few minutes, that I may deliver thy mercy before the diplomats arrive, my toil made fruitless by their steely hands. Now, bring the bambini to me, the Monsignor said, gesturing at the bassinets. There isn't much time. The doctor said something to the children in Arabic before grabbing a bassinet and wheeling it over. As soon as the bassinet was next to the Monsignor, he picked up the newborn and began the rite. Amen, amen, I say to you, the Monsignor said in his native Italian. No one can enter the kingdom of God without being born of water and spirit, and so I baptize you in the name of the Father. The Monsignor brought the child's head under the faucet and let the cool water run over her. In the name of the Son, the newborn cried as the water flowed over her head again. And in the name of the Holy Spirit. He put the newborn's head under the water for a third and final time. His task done, the Monsignor returned the newborn to the bassinet. Where does this halo of protection come from? The doctor asked, pushing over another bassinet. The child is Christian. The Monsignor picked up the new infant, a baby boy, and lowered the child's head toward the running water. But the child is Saudi, no? O Lord, thou art true, and being truth, I conform myself to thee, so that even now, even in this darkest moment, I shall not lie, poison thy creation with the falsehoods of the enemy. See, the Monsignor admitted. The doctor's eyes grew wide. You're baptizing them? Grabbing the Monsignor, he pulled him away from the sink. It's the only way to save the children! The Monsignor pleaded, unable to lean forward and get the child's head under the water. How dare you! The doctor seethed. These are Muslim children born to Muslim parents! It's apostasy! A searing pain shot down the Monsignor's left arm, his aged body failing. He could not go on much longer. All of Arabia is in ruin, he cried. These bambini are orphans now. Their parents surely dead. I must protect them while I still can. No! The doctor pulled with renewed strength. I won't let you! O Lord God, the creator and disposer of all things in nature, of sin the disposer only, grant my earthly vessel one last thrust of vigor, that I may have the strength of Samson before my end. Monsignor Innocenti dug deep, summoning all his power. Somehow countering the might of the much younger man, he stretched himself forward and dipped the child's head under the running water. I baptize you in the name of the Father! Stop! The doctor yelled, redoubling his strength and pulling the Monsignor away from the sink. O Lord, even before a word is on my tongue, thou knowest it. Thou knowest that I am terrified, tormented by the slaughter of these innocents. But I would die 1,000 deaths, undergo in a trial that just one more child might live. So I beg thee, intercede for me now. Do for me what I, thy lowly servant, cannot. The Monsignor shifted so that the child's head was again positioned under the flowing water. And in the name of the Son. Adjusting his grip, the doctor pulled the Monsignor away from the sink with even surer strength. He yelled something in Arabic, and the huddling throng of children descended on the Monsignor with terrible speed. Please! The Monsignor pleaded. It's the only way! The little hands grasped at him, determined to snatch the newborn away. He struggled to hold on to the baby, but the children were smothering him, endangering the little one, so he let them take the boy, thrusting the infant into the arms of an 8-year-old girl. We don't have much time. The diplomats will be here soon. The doctor continued to restrain the Monsignor like he was a robber in the night. My God, please show me a way to save these children. I beg thee. A child let out a scream. The Monsignor and the doctor turned in unison. Looming in the doorway was a diplomat, its metal body gleaming, its crimson head drenching the nursery in a deathly glow. The Monsignor gasped. We're too late. Moving its robotic torso through the shattered doorway, the diplomat picked up the infant wriggling at the threshold and cradled it with the gentleness of a mother. The child in its steely arms, the diplomat carried the infant to an empty bassinet and placed it down softly, making sure no harm came to the little boy. Oh Lord, in thy mercy, keep those infernal machines still. Strike sense into thy wayward pilgrims. They may see their error before it is too late.
With no barrier holding them back, the killer machines leapt forward, unleashing their fury into the room. The doctor released his grip on the Monsignor as the children scattered in every direction. They fell to the ground as the machines caught up to them, their eyes wide, a look of waking death seared onto their faces. The doctor's fists flew at the machines in a desperate attempt to protect the two children cowering behind him. Yet no matter how swift his punches, the machines were swifter still, overwhelming the doctor until he was face down, limp on the floor. The Monsignor dove toward a young boy whose little hands were trying frantically to dislodge a machine clinging to his hip. The Monsignor swiped the machine onto the floor, immobilizing it under his foot.
Oh my God, my loving God, who has known me since before I knew myself, let my body shield this child. Let me remain here as long as it takes. Let my flesh turn to dust before this child sees any harm.
Wrapping the little boy in his arms, the Monsignor checked the child's back to ensure there were no machines lurking there. But as he beheld the child's face, the boy's eyes grew wide, and his body went limp. A little machine scurried away from his ankle, its work done. Monsignor Innocenti laid the child down, the nursery his final resting place, and surveyed the room. The 8-year-old girl was still breathing, the newborn alive in her arms. Kneeling at the feet of the motionless diplomat, she sobbed, rocking back and forth. Monsignor Innocenti rushed toward her, but he wasn't fast enough. A small machine leapt up to her neck before he could stop it. She fell backward, her lifeless gaze fixed on the security camera above. The infant twisted in the girl's dead arms.
Please, Lord, let me save him. I beg of thee.
Monsignor Innocenti grabbed the newborn from the girl before the nearest machine could strike. He sprinted toward the sink as the little machines climbed into bassinets, extinguishing the unbaptized newborn's cries like candles, one by one.
And in the name of the Holy...
the Monsignor said as he thrust the child's head underneath the flowing water, one word away from salvation. Before he could say the final word, the child went limp, its little eyes wide open, its tiny body still. A glint of metal flashed in the corner of the Monsignor's eye, skittering away across the floor. Hand clutching his chest, the Monsignor fell to his knees with a cry, still cradling the deceased child with his other arm.
My God, why hast thou forsaken me?
The Monsignor slumped over, his consciousness fading, his fragile heart finally giving out. As the cries of the two surviving infants filled the Monsignor's ears, the diplomat approached him. Kneeling beside him, it made the sign of the cross with its steely hand and began to pray, its deep bass voice echoing throughout the room. It was the last thing the Monsignor would ever hear. Part 1, Chapter 1, 56 hours until arrival. In 2 days, Austin would be dead, along with everyone else, including Aurelia. But he still had one last chance to be with her, to smell her golden hair, to kiss her perfect lips. It all came down to the phone in his pocket, the phone he wasn't allowed to be carrying, the one he was caressing as he marched through the night in a drunken haze. Mr. Washington shot him a concerned look.
You all right, Austin?
Yes, I'm fine, he managed to reply, the cheap hooch he'd plied himself with threatening to come back up. Mr. Washington nodded, but the look of unease remained on his mahogany face. Ignoring it, Austin stared across the high school football field to see the last neighborhood civil defense platoon taking its place on the visitor end zone. In a few moments, the regulars would call the muster to order, and his chance to see Aurelia's post in time would vanish.
Attention!
The sergeant stalked along the first row of men. He was clad in full battle dress, his regalia a sharp contrast to the civilians gathered on the field, half still in their pajamas. Behind him on the running track, his commander, a lieutenant, stood with a half-dozen regulars on either side. "Let's go! Move it!" the sergeant yelled. Austin peeked at his phone as the formation came to order. Still nothing.
The Pentagon estimates the aliens will enter Earth's atmosphere this Friday around noon Eastern Time,
the lieutenant stated with a firmness that contrasted with her petite frame.
For now, we assume the premise is true, but...
She cut off as a black Humvee rolled onto the track. 2 figures exited the Humvee. From their steel-toed boots to their tactical helmets, they were clad in black, the only hint of color being the remorseless eyes that peeked out from their balaclavas. The black shirts were here.
But,
the lieutenant continued, her voice betraying a slight quiver.
We must always remember General Ferguson's words. The corollary is only as strong as our bravery.
She nodded to the sergeant. Okay, you maggots, the sergeant shouted. Let's see how well you've been studying your civil defense manuals. Planting his feet in front of a middle-aged man on the 10-yard line, he said, You! What's the first assumption of alien capability? It's that... The sound of a broken rib cage washed over the muster as the man fell at the sergeant's feet. The lieutenant's gaze shot to the black shirts, as if in search of approval, but they betrayed nothing. Returning her attention to the man writhing on the ground, she said,
We give you those manuals for a reason, militiamen. You'd do well to study it closer.
Austin's stomach curled, the swill ready to come back up, when he felt his phone vibrate. Aurelia. You! The sergeant pointed at another man. Go! Austin wondered whether the black shirts could see his hand from where he stood in the second row. They could. Easily. But in 2 minutes, her post would disappear, and the password it contained would be gone forever. This was his only chance for a bit of happiness before the end. This is what he'd risked bringing his phone for. Sir! The militiaman shouted. The first assumption of alien capability is that the aliens have cyber dominance, sir! Before Austin could stop himself, his hand turned, revealing the phone. His body was taking over, giving in to the urge to see the password despite the feeble protests of his booze-dulled brain. Triumph. The nausea disappeared. Triumph. How apropos. 3 years of following her socials, paying for her all-access content. She had been his only ray of brightness in a cold and dying life. But now, with the password, it was all about to pay off. Just one paycheck stood between him and her in-person fee. Just one more boring class to teach before he could hold her in real life, wrap himself up in her purple sheets, and wait for the end of the world.
That's correct, militiamen,
the lieutenant said.
All things digital or electronic are to be considered intelligence, liabilities, or attack vectors. That's why military formations have to be able to operate low-tech. Take the aliens' advantage away.
Austin covered the phone with his palm, wondering if he'd been noticed. The regulars and the black shirts were all focused on the lieutenant. Austin's gamble had paid off.
It's not enough to simply know the first assumption of alien capability. You have to follow it.
The lieutenant gave the sergeant a nod. Check! The sergeant bellowed. First row, arms out! The nausea returned in a heartbeat. Suddenly, his phone felt like an anchor, dragging him to the bottom of a dark sea. It had been 3 years since the regulars had called for a tech check at a muster. Austin had been sure they didn't bother with those anymore. But he hadn't counted on a surprise visit from the black shirts. Lieutenant, I got something! The sergeant yelled, clutching a chubby militiaman who was shaking uncontrollably.
Let's see it.
Sweat erupted on Austin's brow as the chubby militiaman pulled up his shirt, revealing a small plastic rectangle on his abdomen. It's my insulin pump, ma'am, the militiaman said. I need it. The lieutenant's face fell. She glanced at the black shirts, taking a second before turning back to address the militiaman.
Do you think your diabetes is more important than the planet's defense?
The chubby man's mouth quivered.
Sometime in the stockade will help you sort out your priorities. Take him in.
The man sobbed as two regulars dragged him off the field.
First row! Fall out!
The sergeant barked.
Next row! Arms up!
When the men in the first row turned 90 degrees to their left and began marching away, Austin's heart pounded as panic overtook him. In a few seconds, he would be in the front row, his phone exposed for all to see. And Aurelia would be gone forever. Rather than in her beautiful arms, he would spend his final hours in a sweaty, throbbing cell. He cursed himself for bringing the infernal thing, wishing with all his being he could just be rid of it. That was when he felt a hand on his, prying the phone from him, absolving him of his misery. Austin forced himself not to turn around to look his salvation in the face. Instead, he let the phone go from his grasp moments before it was his turn to stretch out his arms. The sergeant manhandled him, his palms sweeping over Austin's body with the gentleness of a bulldozer. But there was no contraband to be found. After a moment, the sergeant moved on to pat down Mr. Washington, who stood next to Austin in line. The nausea he felt lifted, and he exhaled in relief. Aurelia really would be his, one last pleasure before the eternal blackness, some unknown stranger to thank. A bump on Austin's thigh made him freeze, all his muscles tensing in unison. His benefactor was trying to return the phone to Austin's pocket, but his aim was off. He kept fumbling on Austin's leg, the whole clumsy spectacle impossible to hide.
Hey, you!
The sergeant raced toward Austin, his face twisted in fury. Austin tensed, preparing for the worst, but to his surprise, the sergeant charged past him and grabbed the man behind him. As the sergeant dragged the man forward, Austin saw his savior for the first time. He was old, probably in his early 70s, with a thick head of shock white hair and a mustache to match.
Ma'am,
the sergeant said, shoving the old man in front of the lieutenant.
This man was trying to hide his phone in the pocket of a militiaman I'd already searched.
Though the old man stood a head taller than the lieutenant, he seemed to shrink under her scrutinizing gaze.
Please, ma'am,
the old man stammered.
I'm forgetful in my old age. When I realized I had the phone on me, I got scared. I didn't mean to do it. Please have mercy.
Bile clawed at the back of Austin's throat. This kind old man had saved him, and even now he was lying to protect him. The lieutenant stole a quick glance at the black shirts. They loomed ominously by their Humvee, their narrow eyes hunting for disobedience.
Forgive you?
She said after collecting herself.
Do you think the aliens will be so forgiving?
The old man trembled. Austin's mouth opened to confess, to spare the old man, but no words came to his lips. The lieutenant's cold command cut through the air.
20 lashes,
she declared.
Sergeant, get my whip.
A pain shot through Austin's heart as the regulars forced the old man to his knees and ripped off his shirt. The man's back was spotted and pale, so pallid it nearly glowed in the pre-dawn murk. Without ceremony, the lieutenant got behind the old man and took the whip from the sergeant's hand. Her gaze once again went to the black shirts, their heartless eyes still and unmoving, before she turned back to the kind old man.
1!
She hurled the leather tongue onto his back, leaving a trail of broken skin in its wake. The night echoed with the old man's scream.
2!
Austin's stomach squeezed, the booze threatening to make itself known.
3!
The whole formation shuffled as the old man's agony crested over them. Austin tried to distract himself by focusing on the lieutenant's patches, reading and rereading them over again. Lieutenant Wu, U.S. Army, 22nd Mechanized Battalion.
15!
It didn't work. The sight too gory for his stomach to bear. He let loose, retching and then retching again, until all that he heaved was air. By the time he finished, the old man was lying wasted, bloody on the ground, and the sergeant was storming toward Austin, fists clenched in rage. Chapter 2. 53 hours until arrival. She stood in the doorway like a wraith, her nearly translucent skin complementing the pale blue of her nightgown, the garment so threadbare it looked as though it were made of tissue paper. His mother stood a foot shorter than him, her thinning hair at eye level, the gray roots climbing out of her skull like a creeping obsolescence. To a stranger, she might have looked like a nut job. But she was just poor, the money for luxuries like hair dye and new nightgowns having long since run out.
Austin?
She scrunched up her face.
Are you okay?
Struggling to close the front door to the apartment with his unresponsive arms, he said, "What time is it?" She pointed at the vomit stain on his shirt and frowned. For breaking attention, the sergeant had made him do 100 push-ups on top of his own sick. But he didn't have time to explain. Mom, what time is it?"
It's 7:38.
Austin's heart sank through the floor. He rushed past her, down the hall and into his bedroom, where he turned on his Jurassic laptop, the whir of its barely functioning hard drive filling the room. He was late. 8 minutes late. Those 8 minutes could be all the difference between him dying alone or in the arms of Aurelia. As the machine booted up, he tore off his soiled shirt and grabbed another one from atop the pile of dirty clothes on his bed, just managing to get it on before the video conference loaded.
Come on, you know you want to.
The sound of Austin's class spilled out of the tinny laptop speakers. The kids were scattered about the classroom, some perched on desks, others leaning by the window, evidently taking full advantage of what they thought would be an unscheduled free period. Miraculously, an administrator was nowhere to be seen.
Everyone will be there,
Kevin continued, his southern drawl cutting through the chatter. He was standing next to Nicole, who was seated at her desk, trying not to let her gaze linger on Kevin's canyon-esque dimples.
It might be your last chance to have some fun.
Salve discipuli! Austin summoned his best teacher's voice. Let's all take our seats so we can begin. Getting a bunch of teenagers to focus on Latin was challenging in the best of times, but it was nigh impossible to do so when aliens were set to arrive on Earth in 2 days, and the teacher himself showed up almost 10 minutes late. Austin, however, had no choice but to proceed. Administrators often checked in on the classes of remote teachers, especially substitutes like Austin. While he was lucky that none had decided to stroll in before he logged on, they would still be none too pleased with the classroom's current state of disarray. Salve discipuli, Austin repeated, his tone sterner.
Salve, Magister!
The class half-heartedly replied, ambling back to their seats. This was Austin's last class before the arrival. The school would be closed the next day and the day after that. He just had to get through this lesson to receive his final paycheck, the last thing he needed to book his intimate session with Aurelia. Let's pick up where we left off in Book 3 of the Aeneid, he said, with Anchises' death in Sicily. Who wants to start?
Why were you late, Mr. D?
Adam's drawl was even thicker than Kevin's, seemingly a prerequisite for admission to this private academy in Savannah, Georgia, a veritable assembly line of Southern gentlemen and debutantes. Muster ran late, Austin said, the image of the old man's bloody back floating through his mind. Now, let's look at line 692, he said, shoving the vile image down. Sicanio praetenta sinu iacet insula contra plemurium undosum, nomen dixere priores ortugium.
Do you think it'll work, Mr. D?
Adam was still looking at the front of the classroom where Austin's head was displayed on a huge monitor, his copy of the Aeneid noticeably unopened. Austin frowned. Do I think what will work?
The musters, the mobilization, the nuke stockpiling?
Adam said.
All of General Ferguson's plans?
No. It was a pipe dream. A parody of hope. We're not here to talk about the arrival. Austin tried to sound gentle but prodding. We're here to translate the Aeneid.
Oh, come on, Mr. D.
Kevin chimed in, his desk pulled conspicuously close to Nicole's.
You're the only teacher trying to teach anything today. The rest are just showing movies.
Austin grimaced. The other teachers were full-time and tenured, but he was a substitute. one slip-up away from being fired and his pay withheld, a consequence Principal Madison never tired of reminding him of. I'm not responsible for their classrooms. I'm responsible for mine. And it's important we learn this stuff.
Important?
Kevin laughed.
Not when the world is going to blow up on Friday.
Trying to slow his racing heart, Austin took a deep breath. Kevin was right, of course. This was all pointless. School was nothing but a way to keep kids from running amok as the clock ticked down to the end of the world. But the school had a clear policy for when the kids started saying that all hope was lost. Arrival anxiety, they called it. Teachers were to remind students of the premise, try to convince them everything would be okay, and then get them back to their schoolwork. The aliens aren't going to blow up the planet, Austin said, trying to sound like he believed what he was saying. That's the point of the premise. If the aliens wanted to kill us, they would have attacked Earth at range years ago as they traveled here. They haven't, so we operate under the premise that they're peaceful.
Maybe they've got to get up close to use their weapons,
Kevin replied. No, Austin said with a shake of his head. When the alien ship lit up the night sky 5 years ago with its deceleration burn and set off the Great Panic, it was traveling at almost 10% the speed of light. If the aliens had simply dumped their sewage and let it crash into Earth, the kinetic energy would have been enough to blow the crust off the planet. So, no, they don't have to get close. Their spaceship is basically a weapon already. Austin felt his stomach churn. He'd heard some government flack deliver that exact explanation in a press conference a few days earlier. He hated doing the same, but he had to do what it took to be with Aurelia.
But what if...
Kevin, we need to get back to work.
No, hear me out, Mr. D. What if the aliens change their minds and decide to stop being peaceful? Have you ever thought of that?
Austin winced. He'd thought of nothing but that. They won't.
I don't know, Mr. D. They've been making their way to Earth for 5 years, and they haven't replied to a single communication. Seems kind of suspicious to me.
It didn't seem kinda suspicious. It seemed incredibly suspicious. But all Austin said was, I'm sure they have a good reason for not responding.
Maybe they do, but what's going to stop them from saying, you know what? These human meat bags suck. Let's blow them up.
The corollary, Austin said through clenched teeth. It follows from the premise that the aliens believe peace is more profitable than violence, so humanity can ensure peace by increasing the cost of conflict. That's why governments worldwide have expanded their militaries, trained citizen militias, and built up weapons stockpiles. If the aliens become hostile, they'll get sucked into an endless guerrilla war. That's how we'll make sure the aliens stay on their best behavior. Even though he was repeating, nearly verbatim, the justification the regulars often gave at the musters, Austin knew better. Militia duty wasn't about protecting the planet. It was about keeping the population too tired and afraid to disobey.
Random dudes with rifles are going to scare the aliens? I don't think so, Mr. D.
Kevin, that's enough. Now...
He's messing with you, Mr. DeSantis,
Julia said from the front row, a scowl parting the sea of freckles on her face.
I saw his dad on TV saying his hedge fund was going to make a killing betting against all the warriors who think the world ends on Friday. He's just pretending to be afraid of the arrival so he can convince Nicole to hook up with him before the world ends. Shut up, Julia.
Nicole shouted. The classroom shattered into laughter, and Kevin sat at his desk with a self-assured smile on his face. That's enough! Austin yelled. I need you all to stop. His pleas fell on deaf ears as the class collapsed into a series of individual conversations. Aurelia's image floated into Austin's mind. Her symmetric face, her perfect skin. He'd come so close to having her, surviving a tech check, keeping his mouth shut as they tortured an old man, and completing 100 push-ups in his own vomit. Now he was being thwarted by a bunch of 16-year-olds, kids too young to drive, too carefree to have tasted true failure. Guys! He shouted, but not one person looked over. It was hopeless. Trying again, he said, "Listen up!" Frustration burned in him when not so much as one head turned toward the front of the class. Austin's cheeks flushed. "You want to know the truth?" His voice filled with acid, a tone so caustic it cut right through the din. "Kevin's right. This Friday, we're all dead." The room went silent. The aliens traveled across the galaxy in an asteroid so big it could house the entire U.S. population with room to spare. Do you realize how much power that takes? The students stared at him, a few mouths going agape. "A shit ton!" Austin focused on Kevin, glad to see his self-assured smile had evaporated. There's no way an alien race capable of that level of staggering power has any time for humanity. We're like insects to them, and the first thing they're going to do when they get here is clean house. Feeling his blood pressure rising, Austin took a breath to calm himself. Running a hand over his head, he said, "I don't know why the aliens haven't killed us already. I really don't. But come Friday, it's all over. No matter what Kevin's dad and all the government lackeys think. So can we please just translate the Aeneid for the next hour?" All eyes were locked on him as he pleaded with them. "It might be a waste of time, but I need the money to buy one last moment of pleasure in my life before we all die. And after today's class, we'll never have to see each other ever again." The second the truth slipped from his lips, he thought he'd feel better. But instead, he felt awful. Austin inhaled deeply, staring at his students, who'd all gone quiet. The hangover, the indignity of being disobeyed by teenagers, the vision of the kind old man being whipped. None of it had been fixed by his outburst, but at least his class was under control. It was a start. But then Austin noticed something. The students weren't looking at him. Their gazes had all turned to the side of the classroom. Before Austin could figure out what they were staring at, a figure emerged into frame. Principal Madison stared back at him, a look of horror on his face. Chapter 3. 50 hours until arrival.
That one?
The bartender pointed his meaty hand at the bottle of high-end scotch.
It's 40 grand a shot.
Austin nodded. There was no point in saving his pennies anymore. His last chance at getting what he needed had gone out the window when Principal Madison had let him go. Without his last paycheck. Instead of going for the scotch, the bartender went for the Fed coin machine and then plonked the heavy metal box in front of him.
Pay first, then I pour.
Austin sidled onto a bar stool that tilted on the uneven floor. Let's keep it open. I'll be drinking all day. I don't want the feds to cut me off. The bartender leaned over the bar, bringing his basketball-sized face close to Austin's.
Do I look stupid to you?
The bartender let the question hang.
The aliens arrive in 2 days, and every lush in Virginia wants to rack up a tab drinking top-shelf whiskey they think they'll never have to pay for. I'm not falling for it. Cough it up now or get out.
In no state to argue, Austin pressed his thumb to the fingerprint reader on the Fed coin machine and then entered his 6-digit PIN. It rewarded him with a green flash and a soothing ding, letting the bartender know he had sufficient funds. That Austin had sufficient funds came as no surprise. The last time he'd looked at his Federal Reserve account, he'd had almost $5 million. More than enough for a glass of expensive scotch, but about 150 grand short of booking his session with Aurelia. Almost exactly how much he would have been paid for today's Latin class if he hadn't been fired. He'd been saving up for 5 months, scrimping every penny, forgoing every comfort. He'd even unsubscribed from her all-access social feed to save some cash. all so he could be with her in person at a luxury hotel in Washington, D.C., an extravagance she reserved solely for fans dedicated enough to catch one of her disappearing passwords and wealthy enough to pay the steep price for 4 hours of her time. Now, it would never happen. The bartender set the rocks glass in front of him, and Austin wasted no time in slugging the scotch down. He gagged as he sucked it in, memories of his retching from earlier this morning still fresh on his stomach's mind. But as the crisp, clean booze settled into his bloodstream, he could feel his body equalizing, the scotch smoothing out his come-down from the cheap swill he'd drunk the night before. Pushing the empty glass forward, Austin asked, "How much for the bottle?" The bartender shot him a skeptical glance.
Just shy of $1 million.
"I'll take it," he said with a nod. The bartender hesitated, his arms locked across his chest. A bottle of bathtub hooch would cost a tiny fraction of that sum and be just as effective at getting him lit. "Feds can't cut me off once I already have the bottle," Austin explained, gesturing at the Fed coin machine. "And I might as well drink the good stuff before I die." Seemingly satisfied with the explanation, the bartender relaxed his arms.
You're not gonna die, kid.
He began to type in the new purchase amount.
You ain't that lucky. Your problems are still gonna be here come Saturday.
Austin nodded politely, unwilling to disabuse the barman of his false hope, and placed his thumb back on the reader. As he entered his PIN, he braced himself for the red light and the jarring denial tone. But, to his surprise, it flashed green. It wasn't long after the aliens had been detected coming toward Earth that society broke down. Riots, price spirals, cops walking off the job. Order didn't really make sense when you thought the world was going to end in a few years. But the governments that did survive fought back, and while the black shirts did their part, it was the digital dollar that put them firmly back in control. With cash eliminated and all deposits held at the Federal Reserve, the government could see all purchases in real time and tinker with people's balances at will. Shoot your mouth off at a cop? Your Federal Reserve account gets debited on the spot. Go to the bar a bit too much? Next time you go out, the machine will flash red when you want to buy a drink. Do right by Uncle Sam by ratting on a neighbor who skipped muster? You might just find a life-changing sum waiting for you in your account. Only those smart enough to buy Bitcoin before the Great Panic had been able to get off that vicious ride, and Austin hadn't been smart enough. The bartender handed him the bottle, and he pulled the cap off and took another slug, trying to drown his regret. As the scotch rolled down his throat, he began to feel a warmth in his stomach. He languished in relief as the scotch carried his troubles away, only to have Principal Madison float back into his mind. He hadn't just robbed Austin of a paycheck when he'd fired him. He'd taken away his last chance of happiness in this world. And for what? A little yelling? For telling the kids the truth for once? When Mr. Hanlon had stormed off the job 6 months earlier, Austin had come to Principal Madison's rescue, allowing the Latin class to continue uninterrupted. Madison had been lucky to find Austin, a once up-and-coming classics professor, the most overqualified substitute Latin teacher in the country. Yet all it took was one slip-up for Principal Madison to cast him out. Austin poured some of the overpriced scotch into the cloudy glass. Madison had been merciless, just like Lieutenant Wu. That man, that kind old man, he'd made just one mistake. And rather than cut him a break, she'd cut his back open. If only Lieutenant Wu could feel the same pain. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, he winced, berating himself. Austin abhorred violence, always had. The idea of Lieutenant Wu's small back being ripped apart by a whip. It was too much. No one should have to suffer that. Not even her. But he allowed himself the joy of imagining her being discovered with a cell phone by her superiors, the feeling of helplessness she would experience knowing her fate was out of her hands. She deserved it. And in Austin's fantasy, he was the one who made that happen. He smiled. The scotch was working, dulling the pain. With any luck, he would be able to drink the bottle dry while he hid from the aliens in this dingy hole.
Breaking news.
The TV blared, shaking Austin from his drunken wanderings.
We're receiving reports Ghana has just detonated a nuclear device. We go live to our Pentagon correspondent for more.
The bartender was standing a few feet from the dilapidated flat-screen TV, a remote in his hand.
Hey,
Austin was already beginning to slur.
I came here to get away from that crap.
The bartender turned his barrel-chested frame in Austin's direction.
I always watch the morning news. You have a problem with it, get out.
Austin shrank back in his stool as the bartender turned the volume up.
Early this morning, satellites detected a 2-kiloton nuclear explosion in Mole National Park, 75 miles west of the Ghanaian city of Tamale.
The correspondent was standing in the Pentagon briefing room, the creases on her pantsuit so sharp that they almost looked like a military uniform.
This makes Ghana the 93rd nation to become nuclear capable. I was able to sit down with General Ferguson to get his reaction.
The image cut to General Ferguson sitting across from the correspondent in an aircraft hangar, a giant American flag covering the wall behind. His face was long, like an airport control tower, and his irises were so thin it was as if his face were populated by 2 black holes. When he spoke, he moved his head with a subdued vitality, the small movements enough to make him look like a man 20 years his junior. Yet his face was woven with wrinkles, their edges so sharp they looked like cavalry sabers held aloft for a charge.
The corollary,
General Ferguson's voice pulsated like war drums in the distance,
is only as strong as our bravery. And now, through the valiant efforts of our Ghanaian brothers, another nation has smashed the atom and added themselves to the nuclear family so that the human race may ensure that humans and aliens shall remain at peace. The threat of a brutal, asymmetric war, the price to pay should the aliens' reason and comedy ever fail.
The poetic confidence, the martial appearance straight out of Central Casting. Austin could understand why he'd become the face of Earth's defense. But it was a false hope, the ballad of a lost cause. It didn't matter how many nukes humanity stashed secretly around the world to fuel a nuclear-armed insurgency. Friday would be the end of all things. Of that, Austin was sure.
Thank you,
the news anchor said as the shot returned to him in the studio.
In other news, UN Secretary General Roshana called on China to cease further tests of their orbital nuclear launch platform, reminding the Chinese General Secretary that such tests were inconsistent with the premise, which China affirmed along with other nations in the Helsinki Accords.
It was all the news Austin could take. Grabbing the bottle, he stood up from his stool on his scotch-soft legs and carefully made his way over to the booth at the far end of the bar. The sound of the TV faded to a drone as he nestled himself inside the wooden booth and poured himself another glass.
Cynthia, it's no use,
a man said, his voice cutting into Austin's solitude.
It'll never work.
Why wait, then? Cynthia responded, and Austin heard something slam onto the table in the booth next to his. His eyes shot to the right, trying to see, but the walls of the booth were too high. His own private enclave.
Just pull the trigger and end it now, Liam.
Are you crazy?
Austin heard Liam scrambling.
If the bartender...
If nothing. It won't be long before your boss figures out the money is gone. And if we don't get the last $5 million for the coyote, you'll be in jail for embezzlement before the weekend. I'm not raising our daughter on my own. You promised me you'd be there for her.
Austin's ears perked up, and he waited in breathless silence for Liam to respond. When he finally did so, his low voice was full of surrender.
What's the difference? We're all dead Friday anyway.
Austin braced himself for Cynthia to respond in a rain of slaps, but she only said,
You and I both know this shitty world is still going to be spinning come Saturday. You're just giving up. Taking the coward's way out.
Liam took a defeated breath.
I know you're right, my love. But everyone is trying to get to El Salvador. I had the whole thing planned down to the last penny. But that rat raised his price at the last minute. Now my plan is toast. We'll never cover the shortfall in time.
There's 10 million in that store,
she said calmly.
More than enough to cover the gap.
Even in his scotch-infused haze, the words 10 million traveled through Austin's ears with a supernatural clarity. That was double what he'd managed to save in 5 months of brutal scrimping. He put the scotch down and leaned closer, an ember of hope sparking to life inside him. The store might be a dump, but it has eyes. We won't get 10 miles away before the cops nab us. It won't work.
You're making excuses,
Cynthia snapped back.
Cameras don't run without a hard drive.
Do you know how to take a hard drive out of a computer?
You know I don't.
There was a brief pause.
Let's just take the whole computer.
Store computers have a GPS in them now. If we try and move it, the alarm will go off and ping the cops. Then you'll be in jail too.
So we smash it.
Cynthia sounded desperate.
This is our child we're talking about.
I know. But if I mess with the wrong part, it pings the cops. The only thing you can take is the hard drive. And I have no idea how to remove one of those without just pulling the whole thing apart. I'm sorry.
Aurelia was there again in Austin's mind, her golden locks, her sapphire eyes. She could be his after all. He grabbed the bottle of scotch and approached the neighboring booth.
I think I can help,
Austin said.
Were you listening to us?
Liam said, his face compressed in anger. Austin's eyes widened as the man let go of Cynthia's hand and grabbed a gun from the table. Even though Liam was seated, Austin could tell he was as tall as Cynthia was short, easily over 6 feet, and his forearms bulged, so much so they threatened to tear the rolled-up sleeves of his dress shirt. He had straight hair that parted right down the middle and clear green eyes that were at once both sultry and disarming. Cynthia made for a beautiful terror, sharp brown eyes shining with fury, long brown hair billowing down her shoulders. Not even her pregnant belly could soften her, make her look any less fierce. But now that Austin could see them together, he saw how each's beauty magnified the other, the type of couple whose photo would populate the frames in a frame store.
My laptop was old even before the Great Panic,
Austin quickly explained.
But I've managed to keep the thing chugging along ever since. Gone through 4 hard drives and 2 motherboards. I can handle what you need done.
Cynthia looked Austin up and down.
You a cop?
No, just desperate.
Her eyes narrowed at him.
How desperate?
I'll do what you need. For $2 million.
Cynthia shot Liam a look, letting him know his last excuse was finally exhausted. He held out for a few moments before he nodded, assenting to the ferocious woman's will.
Go home and sober up. We hit the store tonight.
Liam took the bottle of scotch from Austin.
We'll pick you up in the parking lot across the street at midnight.
Austin nodded as his eyes lingered on the $1 million bottle in Liam's hands. Letting him have it was worth it if it meant he'd get to be with Aurelia.
Thank you so much, stranger.
Cynthia looked at Austin with great affection, like he'd grabbed her stroller before it was run over by an oncoming bus. Then her eyes hardened.
But if you do anything to risk my baby's life, so help me, it'll be the last thing you do.
Chapter 4. 33 hours until arrival. Liam's crowbar hovered inches from the door, hesitating.
Is there an alarm?
Austin asked, eager to get the show on the road.
No,
Cynthia said, her voice low.
The owner practically lives here. He doesn't need one.
Where is he now?
Austin asked. The question had rolled around in his head ever since he'd left the bar that morning. How did they know the store would be empty? Or even what valuables the owner had?
Who cares?
Liam said dismissively before wedging the crowbar deep into the door jamb. The answer didn't sit right with Austin. Sure, during the Great Panic, many people had fled to the countryside, but that was mainly to get away from marauding humans. Why, after almost 5 years of the status quo, would someone make a break for it now? It wasn't like trees and wilderness would offer any protection against an advanced interstellar race. Before Austin could follow up with another question, Liam said, "We're in," and entered the shop. Austin was quick to follow. The pre-dawn October air was cold, and even though they had parked behind the shop, he was still worried someone might spot them. Cynthia flipped on the light switch, revealing a short hallway. To their right was a small lavatory, and to the left, a door marked Office. Austin moved down the hall toward the beige curtain that separated the back hall from the main shop. Liam had described the shop as a dump, and from the outside, it had been hard to deny. The brick facade was crumbling, and there were no windows save for the one foggy pane of glass on the main door. Now that Austin was inside, however, he could see the store was immaculately kept. The cheap linoleum floors were spotless, and each product was placed with its label pointing perfectly outward on the shelves. There's one. Liam pointed at the ceiling. Austin looked up to see a camera aimed at a Fed coin machine on the counter. The machine would be zero use to them. It had been only 5 years ago, but it felt like another lifetime when stores had cash in their registers or stashed somewhere in a safe out back. Now, with the government-imposed adoption of the digital dollar, Liam and Cynthia would have to stalk through the store like antiquers at a fair, assessing which goods would fetch the most in resale.
Go find that computer and make sure the cameras are down,
Cynthia instructed Austin before making her way over to the shelf closest to the beverage cooler. Austin nodded, but had to catch himself from staring. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen a pregnant woman, birth rates having fallen off a cliff shortly after the aliens had been detected. The office in the back was small, no wider than a hallway, and contained only a filing cabinet, a metal desk, and a small cot. Austin slid himself in until he reached the desk lamp at the farthest point from the door and turned it on. In its dim light, he could get a good look at the cot. It had been well used over the years, confirming what Cynthia had said. The owner really did seem to spend all his time here. A photo on the desk showed an older man kneeling next to a young boy in a Little League uniform. They were both smiling happily, but something about the photo unsettled Austin. The little boy looked familiar, but that made no sense, given the photo must have been taken decades before he was born based on their clothes. He frowned, an uneasy feeling snaking down his spine. Something wasn't right. But he was too far in to back out now. There was only one way out of this mess, one way to get Aurelia, so he refocused on the task at hand. It took a second to find the computer tower. It was crammed under the desk, and to Austin's delight, it was made by the same manufacturer as his laptop. Just as he was about to open it up, the sound of a bottle shattering rang in his ears, making him jump.
Hun? Are you okay?
Cynthia called.
I'm fine, my love,
Liam shouted back as he walked by the office door carrying an overflowing crate of liquor bottles.
Just dropped a bottle on my way to the car.
Take your time. Each one of those bottles is worth a few $100,000.
All the noise was compounding their chances of being caught. After a few deep breaths, Austin managed to calm himself enough to remove the case of the computer tower. Its side wall was held on by only 2 screws, so he pulled out the small screwdriver set he'd brought with him and figured out which one was the right size. It took him only a minute to take out both screws, and he quickly found the hard drive, disconnected the cables, and pulled it from its slot, leaving the rest of the computer undisturbed. Success. Now, it was just a matter of grabbing the goods and getting out of there before anyone was the wiser. He reattached the computer tower case, slid out of the narrow office, and went back into the main part of the store.
I got it,
Austin said, holding up the hard drive. Cynthia was sitting on a stool behind the cashier's counter, furiously scratching a lottery ticket.
Good,
she said without looking up.
Grab the cigarettes.
Austin put the hard drive in his coat pocket and began grabbing cigarette cartons from the shelf, hoping his speedy compliance would expedite things.
Hey,
Liam said from behind Austin.
What are you doing?
Austin spun around to find Liam holding a wooden crate in his arms.
I know a guy who'll buy a roll for $300,000 a pop,
Cynthia said as she shifted on the stool to face Liam.
But if there's a winner, I'm keeping it for our daughter. I want her to ride horses.
My love, that's crazy. We won't even be here to cash it. Put those down.
Cynthia pointed to the crate in Liam's hand.
What's that?
I found this under the cot in the office.
Pry it open. Let's see what he was hiding under there.
Austin finished gathering the cigarettes, stacking the cartons like firewood in his outstretched arms. While Liam put the crate on the counter, Austin jogged past him to the car out back. Upon returning to the store, he found Liam and Cynthia puzzling over the crate's contents. Know anyone who would want these? Liam asked in a confused voice.
No.
Cynthia tilted her head.
Some rich jerks are throwing an end-of-the-world blowout. They put the word out to keep an eye out for strawberries, but I don't know about this.
Even with aliens arriving, these rich a-holes always find a way to be on top,
Liam seethed. Austin approached the cashier's counter but kept his distance. He wanted to see what was perplexing them, but not enough to get within arm's length of Liam, whose face was turning flush.
I know, hon. I heard they're spending a whole Bitcoin on the party, too.
A whole Bitcoin? On one party?
Liam grabbed something inside the crate and flung it at the wall, sending it splattering in a pale yellow melange.
Ugh! Those parasites!
He scowled as he grabbed another fruit from inside the crate.
Can eat!
Liam sent the fruit flying against the wall, where it exploded in a fibrous splash.
Reprocessed grain!
Liam took 2 more fruits from inside the crate and smashed them on the floor.
Like the rest of us!
The racket was horrible. Austin wanted to flee, but Aurelia drifted back into his mind, and he stayed put.
Are we going to take those?
Austin asked, hoping to refocus his accomplices on their escape. The injustices of the world could wait. Not that they'd matter past Friday anyway.
It's up to you, hon.
Cynthia looked to Liam. Austin, too, reluctantly turned his gaze toward Liam, who was still boiling with anger. Instead of answering, Liam closed the distance with Austin and slapped a pear into his hand.
Smash it,
Liam said, in a way that was devoid of optionality. Austin held the pear in his hand, the first one he'd touched in 5 years. Austin sympathized with the man. Most orchards had been plowed under and turned into grain farms to fill massive grain stores. If the aliens ever poisoned their soil, they would still have food. As a result, fruit was nigh impossible to come by. Except for the rich. He'd forgotten what pears tasted like, and as he stroked the greenish skin, he considered what would happen if he took a quick bite. But with Liam on top of him, he thought better of it. He took a last look at the pear and then sent it sailing across the room into the wall.
Nice one.
Liam patted Austin on the back with his weighty mitt. Something about just letting that pretty thing fly, seeing it break open as it impacted the wall, felt good. It felt good for the wrongness of it, to break something so valuable just because he could. Grabbing another, Austin let it fly with the enthusiasm of a child, letting out an exultant laugh when it splattered onto the far wall in a brilliant display. He became lost in the glee of destruction, enjoying the act for itself and not for any gain it would bring him. He let a third one sail.
Cynthia?
The voice nearly caused Austin to fall over in shock, all the muscles in his body squeezing at once. Standing by the curtain that led to the back hallway was an old man with a hospital bracelet on his wrist and a look of unvarnished pain on his face.
My pears!
The old man cried. Recognition thundered through Austin's body, and for the second time that day, he thought he was going to be sick. It was the old man from the muster, the one who had taken his phone.
Liam?
The old man asked, his voice trembling with hurt and betrayal.
Why?
Liam looked down, unable to meet the man's eyes. Austin had his answer as to how Liam and Cynthia seemed to know so much about the store. They knew this man and knew that something had happened to him. But they didn't seem to know his dedication, that he would get himself to the store straight from the hospital, despite the awful fate that had befallen him at the muster. The old man then turned his gaze to Austin.
And you?
He said with a mixture of confusion and recognition. Austin readied himself to speak, to beg for forgiveness, to let the man know that he wouldn't have come if he had known this was his shop. But before he could, there was a loud thud, and the old man fell to the ground, a splatter of blood landing on Austin's shirt. Cynthia appeared behind him, the Fed coin machine in her hands, blood dripping down its side. She looked toward Liam, who stood there drooping, seemingly too shocked or ashamed to do anything. The old man flailed on the ground at Cynthia's feet.
Help! Please!
He said, reaching his hand toward Austin as blood poured down the back of his skull. Cynthia lifted the Fed coin machine over her head, her pregnant frame poising itself for another blow. Austin's gaze darted to Liam's waistband, where the black metal butt of the handgun glinted in the dim light. The same weapon Liam had threatened him with at the bar was mere inches from Austin's grasp, and its owner was so distracted that it could be Austin's if only he'd reach for it. But a paralyzing fear gripped him, rooting him there like a tree. His heart pounded, echoing in his ears, but he couldn't make himself stop her as she sent the Fed coin machine flying, its heavy metal case soaring downward until it stopped with a deathly thump, crushing the old man's skull like a pear. Chapter 5. 29 hours until arrival. Black shirts. The thought of them haunted Austin as he entered his building lobby. He'd run all through the night to get home as soon as the kind old man had been killed, dashing out of the shop before Liam and Cynthia could stop him, ducking down alleys and over fences to throw them off the trail, ditching the hard drive in a random trash can as the sun peeked over the horizon. He hadn't made a penny from the robbery, the whole misadventure being for naught. But the money was far from his mind, replaced with thoughts of the black shirts coming for him. Homicide was military jurisdiction, which meant they would be after him as soon as the old man was found dead. For all he knew, they were already on the hunt. Bounding up the building stairwell, he covered the 6 flights of stairs to his mother's floor in record time. He needed to get out of his blood-splattered shirt. Then he could figure out what to do next. His mind raced as he approached the apartment. His phone had been destroyed at the muster, so he hadn't brought that to the crime scene, and he had no known connections to Liam and Cynthia. Even the black shirts wouldn't be able to track him down instantly. But they'd find him eventually. They always found who they were looking for.
Oz?
Austin was fumbling with his key when his mother opened the door. The air spilled out of his lungs as he rushed to cover the blood on his shirt.
What are you doing?
I couldn't sleep, Austin said, pushing into the house and making his way to the kitchen sink.
You went out?
Yeah. Austin turned on the water and began scrubbing his hands raw, his back to her so she couldn't see the stain. What are you doing up? Don't you usually have breakfast with Mrs. Armstrong on Thursdays?
Well, she canceled.
His mother came up behind him.
The pharmacy called and told her they finally had her heart medication in stock. She has to run out and pick it up before they're out again.
Austin squeezed dish soap onto his shirt and stretched it until it was under running water.
Hand that shirt over, I'll wash it.
No, Mom, I'm fine. Austin couldn't unsee the store, the blood-covered floor, the old man's shattered skull, Cynthia's swollen belly. What if he had grabbed the gun? Cynthia would have had to stop, and the old man would be alive. But Liam was much bigger than Austin, and distracted as he was, he would have noticed if Austin had gone for the gun. Austin couldn't have done anything. They would have attacked him, too. That was why he froze. They killed the old man, not him. His mother touched his elbow, shocking him back to reality with a jolt that sent water from the tap flying.
Oz!
She stepped back.
You splashed water on me.
Austin clumsily reached for the paper towels and handed his mother a pile.
What's gotten into you? Where were you just now?
Backing up against the kitchen counter, he tried to come up with a plausible explanation, but all he could think of was the old man's skull, bleeding on the floor, and the black shirts coming after him. He couldn't have stopped it, not even with the gun. This wasn't on him. It was Cynthia's fault. If it were up to him, he would have made sure the old man had survived. Of course, he would have been turned over to the police, his last chance with Aurelia ruined, but the old man would be alive. Surely he didn't want the old man to die. That couldn't be the reason he'd done nothing. He had to believe that. A sharp, shooting pain raced through Austin's heart.
Austin,
his mom demanded again.
It's like you're in space. What's going on?
Austin emerged from his fog enough to realize that with every passing second, he incriminated himself further. Sorry, Mom. I'm just tired, he mumbled as he looked back at her, silently begging that she would accept his throwaway answer. He thought he saw her face soften, the tightness around her eyes fade, but it lasted only a moment.
What's that?
She said, pointing at his shirt.
Is that blood?
Austin's head felt light. It's nothing, Mom.
Are you hurt?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I am. I mean, I was, but I'll be fine.
What happened?
She said, coming closer. I cut myself, he said, backing away.
Where?
He wrung his brain for answers, desperately trying to find some way out of this mess. It was really more of a nosebleed.
A nosebleed?
The futility of the moment bore down on him, and he felt himself regressing to a child, tears brimming in his eyes. His mother's expression shifted again, her face softening all the way. It was part reflex and part pattern. Austin had learned long ago she couldn't bear to see him distraught, her one true weakness being her son in pain.
It's okay, Oz,
she soothed.
I'll take care of you.
I'm fine, Mom, Austin choked out.
Did I tell you I had good news?
She said in an obvious effort to cheer him up. No, what is it? He replied, grabbing her lifeline eagerly.
It's the government, Oz.
Her voice rose an octave.
People are getting nervous about the aliens, so they declared a jubilee.
Austin tilted his head, still processing how lucky he was that his mother had let him off the hook.
Well, do you know what this means?
She pressed when he didn't reply. No. What?
I got a deposit in my Fed account,
she said, a genuine smile spreading across her face.
It's equal to 2 months' rent. Can you believe it? They're doing that for all heads of households in the country. 2 months of housing costs as a present. Aren't we lucky to be Americans?
A tingle went down Austin's spine as the significance of the news dawned on him. This was the other side of the digital dollar, the way the government bought loyalty from a scared public with a fire hose of spending. Inflation be damned.
What do you think we should do with it?
His mind immediately went to Aurelia, all concern for the black shirts gone. He could have her. It would take each and every penny in his mother's account, but 2 months' rent would be enough. Swallowing the guilt down, he said, I don't know, Mom. I'll think about it, and walked past her toward the bathroom.
Of course,
she said as he closed the bathroom door.
I love you, Oz.
And I love you too sat immobile on his lips, so slow to emerge that he had closed the door before he responded. He would shower off any other traces of blood, and then he would hide out in his room. The black shirts would be hunting him, but it was the day before the arrival and there would be a lot of scores being settled, a pile of bodies for them to work through. It might take them 2 days to track him down. Swift justice any other time, but not now. Austin would be saved by the end of the world. Chapter 6. 12 hours until arrival. Austin held his breath as his mother rolled over with a grunt and pulled the covers over her pale blue nightgown. When he was sure she was asleep, he reached his hand toward the nightstand with a deliberate steadiness, going for his mother's phone, the only thing that stood between him and Aurelia. Just a few swipes, and she would be his. He tried not to think about the robbery and the fact that it had been totally unnecessary. If he had just drunk himself stupid at the bar and stumbled home to sleep it off, the money would have arrived in his mother's account. No need to rob a store. The kind old man would be alive, and the specter of the black shirts would just be a bad dream. But he couldn't help it. The thought consumed him, spiraling in his brain endlessly, even as his fingers clasped the icy blackness of his mother's phone. Without warning, the bedroom filled with light.
This is the emergency alert system.
The TV blared.
This is not a test. Please stay tuned for a government message.
Austin was used to the television switching on when the government had an announcement, but the timing of this message could not have been worse.
What?
His mother slurred. Austin threw himself to the ground, the phone still clutched in his hand, and pressed his body against the side of her bed. All it would take would be for her to roll over and look down at the floor to see her larcenous son.
The President has asked me to speak with you about the alien mothership that has settled into a cislunar orbit halfway between Earth and the Moon.
From his position on the floor, Austin could see Secretary of Defense Ramirez on the screen. She spoke with a grandmotherly calm, her matronly stillness a sharp contrast to General Ferguson's martial bravado. It was a trait that made her much beloved by the public, who took her mere presence in such a prominent position as proof positive humanity had nothing to fear.
Smaller crafts have also been detected heading for Earth's atmosphere. They should be here around noon Eastern tomorrow. Now, the nice folks at NASA tell me the small crafts are tethered to the mothership, and that could be the way the aliens land.
The mattress shook as his mother moved to the edge of the bed.
But we don't know for sure. All we know is that coming down to say hello doesn't violate the premise. I mean, if I were an alien, I'd be champing at the bit to say hello to all you fine folks in this great country of ours. So, let's give them a warm welcome and be on our best behavior, because any citizens who show hostility by shooting off a gun, or any such thing, will be declared an enemy of the state and will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Austin shrank himself further as his mother put her feet down on the opposite side of the bed. She walked toward the TV, the remote in her hand, and was pressing the power button to turn the TV off. It didn't matter that Austin had told her 1,000 times the power button was disabled during an EAS message.
Now, you might have heard that the Chinese General Secretary has put his nuclear forces on maximum alert. I want to assure you that I've reached out to my colleagues in China to let them know this is against the spirit of the premise and risks provoking an unnecessary war. Instead, we should be extending a hand of welcome. As my abuela used to say, more is achieved by licking than biting. I assure you, it sounds much better in Spanish.
His mother pulled the plug from the wall, and the room was cast into darkness. Austin lay perfectly still as his mother made her way back to bed. He waited there, silently, breathing just enough to stay conscious, until he heard her snores fill the emptiness of the room. From his spot on the floor, he pressed the on button on her phone, and the screen burst to life, a wave of blue light washing over his face. He waited to see if the new light in the room would stir her. When it didn't, he proceeded to type in her PIN. It didn't work. He typed in the code again. No luck. He began to breathe heavier as an overwhelming desire to scream grew within him. He'd come so far, and now a 6-digit number blocked his path. He tried one more time, but got the same result. He was one failed attempt away from locking the phone for 6 hours. She'd used the same PIN for years. Now, of all times, she'd changed it. He wondered if she knew he would try to take the money, but he dismissed it outright. She wasn't that perceptive. In the end, though, it didn't matter. He'd risked everything, and it had all been for naught. His dream of Aurelia had been destroyed. Standing, he looked at his mother, her face pointed at the ceiling, mouth agape. She looked like a hospital patient lying there, sallow, making a racket with every breath. He was about to put the phone back and go find some leftover hooch to drown his misery when a thought crossed his mind. Lifting the phone, he inched it closer to her face, bracing himself for the second the light would be too much and she would wake up. Just as he was about to pull back and admit defeat, the phone shuddered in his hand and the home screen appeared. The facial recognition had worked. He was in. He scrolled past the EAS message and deftly navigated to her Federal Reserve account, where he saw the meager offering from Uncle Sam. It was a pittance meant to buy the pliability of a frightened public, but it was enough for Austin, enough for him to have Aurelia. He transferred the entire balance to his account, put her phone back, and went back to his room. After logging on to his laptop, he finally booked his in-person session with Aurelia, emptying his account as well. He was now ready to face Armageddon, and he would do it in a Washington, D.C. hotel room where he could die in the arms of his beloved. He'd leave first thing. As he crawled into bed, he tried not to think about how his mother would react when she awoke to find her account emptied and her son gone. Chapter 7. 5 hours until arrival. Austin hadn't been clothes shopping in years, but after scouring his closet, he found the clubbing shirt he'd worn in his grad school days. Unfortunately, it had been crammed into his closet so tightly it looked like he was wearing a crumpled-up piece of paper. He pulled the fabric on the black button-down shirt taut, but as soon as he let go, the wrinkles reemerged. He considered ironing the shirt, but thought better of it. He'd never ironed a shirt before, and he was more likely to ruin it than make it look better. Besides, only his mom knew where the iron was stored. Running his fingers over his face, he carefully checked for any spots he might have missed while shaving. His razor was old, dulled by a year of continuous use, a replacement blade practically impossible to come by. He felt little bumps of scruff here and there, but it was the best he could achieve with the rusty old thing. He tried to remind himself that he had succeeded. He'd gotten what he'd wanted. He'd braved the surprise muster, survived a botched robbery, and stolen the money off his mother's phone unnoticed, besting every calamity the universe could throw his way. And in the end, he was going to get the girl. Yet, despite everything, he still felt unhappy. The feeling worried him. If he wasn't happy with Aurelia, how unhappy would he be without her? He tried not to linger on the question, the notion of going without her so bleak he didn't even want to entertain it. Maybe this was all life was, a battle to stay close to zero rather than to fall further and further into negative numbers. If that was all there was to life, then surely he would be better off wrapped up in her purple sheets. A few hours of bliss to mark his final hours. With a sigh, Austin glanced at himself in the mirror. He was as ready as he ever would be. He opened the bathroom door and stepped out.
Austin! You can't go out like that.
His mother stood outside the bathroom door.
Come on, take that shirt off so I can iron it.
She reached for his shirt, not even waiting for a response. Mom, I'm fine, he said, pushing her hands away. Why are you up so early? She stopped, her eyes welling up with tears.
I couldn't sleep, Oz. I couldn't sleep a wink.
Austin felt a tightness in his chest. She had found out what he'd done. He should have known better than to try and hide it from her. Now he was the one who'd caused her pain.
I tried to put it out of my mind, but it just kept swirling, flying around my brain like a bat trapped in an attic.
She was holding her head now, the strain on her forehead showing. He was waiting for the crescendo where she told him how disappointed she was, how she was losing sleep because of what her boy had done to her.
What do they want? Why are they coming? What will happen to us?
She pulled her hands away to reveal the panic in her wide eyes. Austin realized he was wrong. It wasn't the money that had her upset, but the ever-present dread of the arrival, the existential angst of the ticking clock. He had always assumed she was just too simple-minded to let it get to her, that she'd managed to distract herself with the banality of daily life. Now he could see it had been eating away at her for years, and like Mount Vesuvius, the pressure was being released in one cataclysmic burst.
After your father left, I swore I would protect you, but I don't know if I can, Oz.
She reached back, straining for the wall, her knees buckling. Austin darted toward her, catching her before she hit the floor.
Oh, Oz, I'm sorry.
Shh, it's okay, Mom. I've got you. If she had been a much larger woman, he would have had to lower her to the ground, as her legs were barely holding up any weight, but he managed to walk her the few steps from the hallway to the living room and then maneuver her into her usual sitting position on the sofa. I'm going to get you some water.
No, just stay here with me.
He took a seat on the couch next to her as she clutched his hand. I didn't know you were so scared about the arrival, Mom. You never talked about it. The morning sun was coming in the window now, making her tear-streaked face shiny. She sniffed deeply before answering him.
I didn't want you to worry about me. I know what these aliens took from you.
The tenderness in her voice made his heart feel tighter.
You were going to make such a great professor. You were so close.
She was looking at him now, regret etching lines of sorrow on her face. Not regret that he was her son, but that she couldn't do more for him.
Did you know Dean Edwards told me the spoken Latin program you started was one of the most impressive things he'd ever seen in all his years in academics? You were a shoo-in for the next faculty opening. He told me that at the classics department Christmas party you brought me to a few months before the Great Panic.
She reached for a box of tissues on the end table and dabbed her eyes.
Then the aliens showed up. And you had to move back in here with me when the university cut your department. I know how much that hurt you, Oz. I knew how much pain you were in. And I didn't want you to have to deal with a wreck of a mom as well.
Austin put his other hand on top of hers. He had brought so much unhappiness into the house when he'd moved in, and he knew it. Broke, no prospects, abandoned by what few friends he'd had. He was like a dark cloud in her life, constantly avoiding her so he could wallow in front of his laptop to leer at women who didn't even know he existed.
I'm scared. I know the government says the aliens would have already destroyed us by now if that's what they wanted to do, but I can't help it. I just keep wondering why they would come all this way to Earth. Then I get this terrible feeling I'm going to lose you.
She grabbed a few more tissues and blew her nose.
Then I'll be alone. I don't know what I'll do then.
It had been just him and his mom for as long as he could remember, his dad having left before Austin was old enough to talk. The last thing she had in this world was him, and he was about to leave her to face the arrival alone. You're probably better off without me, he said quietly, his voice trailing off as the truth finally slipped out.
Oz, never say that. You're my whole world. I love you so much.
Austin lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. You wouldn't say that if you knew what I did. She grabbed his face and turned it toward her.
No. Never, Austin. I mean it. You can't do anything that will make me stop loving you. Not even emptying my bank account.
A wave of dizziness swept over him. She'd known what he was up to this whole time, and even then, she hadn't brought it up until he did.
How can you say that? I betrayed you, Mom. I know you did. But I forgive you.
She had stopped crying, her mouth upturned in a soft smile.
How can you do that? You gave me everything, and still I wanted more.
Her smile only grew, radiating a warmth he felt he didn't deserve.
It's easy, Oz. Love. It's not just some sentiment. It's the greatest thing in the universe.
She leaned her head on his shoulder.
I know you think I'm being cheesy, but it's true. I love you more than life itself. And I hope with all my heart you'll come to understand love like that someday.
They sat in silence, Austin's hand resting on his mother's. The pain in his heart was still sharp, but it was dulling ever so slightly. Their quiet togetherness was interrupted by the chime of the wall clock, the sound a reminder that Austin had an appointment to keep. Austin's mom stood up and started smoothing out her pale blue nightgown.
Now give me that shirt. You can't go out looking like that.
Austin looked up at her, wondering if she had any idea where he was going, that he was about to leave her, the woman who clearly loved him more than anything else in this world, to be with a woman who, in exchange for a small fortune, would love him for only a few hours. Perhaps, just like with the money, she did know. She was clearly more perceptive than he gave her credit for. She must have noticed him on his phone, looking at Aurelia's profile. Yet here she was, willing to do anything for him despite all the pain he caused her. Running a hand through his hair, he let out a breath. It's okay, Mom. I'm not going anywhere. She tilted her head.
I'll be fine.
No, really, Mom. I'm staying here with you. Her smile grew wide, as if he had said the most touching thing in the world. Without words, she leaned over and hugged him. She squeezed tight, as though if she loosened her grip, he would float away. This time he didn't play any games. He embraced her as well. He couldn't remember the last time he'd hugged her like that.
Thanks, Oz,
she said, pulling away from him.
Now hand over that shirt. I can't stand looking at those wrinkles.
Austin began to protest, but he was cut off by the television in the living room snapping on.
This is the emergency alert system. Alien crafts have entered Earth's atmosphere.
The television blared.
Stand by for an important message.
Chapter 8. 10 minutes until arrival. Austin's finger settled on a photo of his father. Do you hate him for leaving us, Mom? He asked. Her smile faded. They'd been having such a good time all morning, ignoring the TV, flipping through old photo albums, telling stories about happier days. There were even moments when the two of them lost themselves completely, forgetting that they were in their living room waiting for the apocalypse. But Austin knew so little about his mom's relationship with his father, and this was his last chance to ask.
No.
She took the photo album and put it on her lap.
Hate just eats you up inside. It doesn't do any good to hold on to it.
She chewed her cheek.
Though sometimes I wonder what it would have been like for you if you'd had a father around.
Austin touched his mother's hand. You were a good role model, Mom.
I did my best, but a mother can only do so much.
She turned the page and put her finger on another photo.
This was your first trip to Ocean City. All you wanted to do was make sandcastles. I couldn't even get you in the water.
Taking the hint, Austin resumed the pose of the dutiful son. He had more questions about his dad, but there was no sense in picking at old wounds, not when they were trying to squeeze as much happiness as they could out of the little time that remained.
Remember the cotton candy, Oz?
His mother's eyes were distant, back in a memory.
You couldn't get enough.
A grinding noise interrupted her thought. Austin shot up from the couch, straining the buttons on his newly ironed shirt. It's the EAS on your phone, Austin said once he realized the origin of the noise. I'll shut it off. His mother's lips quivered. They'd both agreed not to look at any news. They wanted to be present, to enjoy each other's company, not fixate on the end. But their apartment was like a deep-sea submersible plunging into the depths, the pressure of the outside events building until they inevitably came pouring in.
Austin,
his mother said as he picked up the phone.
Just tell me.
Austin turned the phone off, marveling at how perceptive his mother was. He'd barely glanced at the alert. There's a craft over D.C. That's all I saw. Closing the photo album and placing it on the couch, she said,
Is there any chance the premise, the corollary, all the stuff the government says is true? That we're going to be okay?
Austin opened his mouth, but no words came. Even though his urge to comfort her was strong, he didn't want to lie and tell her there was a chance when he was sure there wasn't. Instead, he shrugged helplessly. Whatever happens, we'll be together. She smiled back, the always grateful recipient of even the most trivial gifts he gave her. "Do you want something to eat?" Austin asked, trying to change the subject. As his mother opened her mouth to answer, a deafening wail assaulted their ears, causing Austin to double over in shock. It was as though an oil tanker had blown its blast signal right into their living room.
"Oh, Austin!"
His mom shouted after the horn stopped.
"What was that?"
Austin rushed to the window and looked out. He couldn't see anything but the cloudy noon sky above and the cracked asphalt of the street below. It was like the horn had come from the air itself, every molecule vibrating in unison.
"Was it them? Was it the aliens?"
His mother's voice trembled. Closing the shades halfway, Austin returned to the couch, taking her hand in his own. "I don't know." A few seconds later, their apartment filled with sound again. Austin pulled his mother to him and hugged her, his muscles tense. His grip loosened, however, when the next sound to fill the apartment was spoken words.
Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum.
"Austin? What is that?"
His mother hollered over the noise. "It's Latin," he said, convinced his mind was playing tricks on him. The look of confusion on his mother's face was a perfect reflection of his own.
"It is,"
she said, as the sound stopped.
"What did it say?"
Austin paused, unsure if he was imagining things. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name."
"You're praying, Oz? That means this is it, doesn't it?"
Tears flooded out of his mother's eyes.
"I love you. I love you so much. I love you more than anything else in the world."
"No, Mom, I'm not praying. I'm translating. That sound was the Lord's Prayer. In Latin." Her mouth twisted.
"The last church around here closed 2 years ago. And none of them ever had loudspeakers that could do something like that."
I think it's the aliens." Her face tensed, a dark thought seemingly having entered her mind.
"Your great-uncle Louis liked to pour cola on the ground. The ants would swarm thinking they'd hit a bonanza. That's when he'd pull out the magnifying glass."
She looked him up and down.
"They couldn't be doing that, could they?"
Austin's stomach turned as he pictured it, his great-uncle laughing as he rained fiery destruction on the unsuspecting ants who, only minutes earlier, had been graced with a sugary windfall. Now it was the aliens' turn to mock, to fill humanity with the false sense of security of the Lord's Prayer, crazy creeds the gullible clung to, right before they finished them off. Austin hesitated as his mother nudged him for an answer. She wanted him to tell her that the aliens weren't a bunch of psychopaths out on an interstellar joyride, that they weren't going to get their jollies by taunting humanity before they destroyed them, that everything was going to be okay. But he couldn't. He was through lying to her. "I'm sorry," he said, bringing her close. They sat in silence, the only noise the sound of his mother's stifled weeping. He wondered when the blackness of death would overtake him. Would he feel anything? Would he know he was dead? Or would it be as inaccessible as the time before he was born? He hoped so. Life was so full of pain, and he saw the kind old man every time he closed his eyes. He'd be glad to be rid of that image, glad for the nothingness of it all. The horn sounded again, and Austin covered his ears, his hands doing very little good. Then the living room window went dark. It was like the daylight was gone, instantly replaced by night. It made the apartment so dim that Austin could barely see save for the trickle of light coming from the microwave clock.
"Austin, this is it!"
His mom shouted in the darkness.
"I love you!
"I love you too!" He held his mother tight, bracing himself for the end. A few moments passed by, and, to his surprise, the apartment became bright again, daytime re-emerging as quickly as it had disappeared.
Was that it? Is it over?
Austin's mind was running too fast to answer. He thought about plugging in the TV to check the news, but he didn't want to subject his mother to images of worldwide destruction before she died. Instead, he went back to the window. She followed, seemingly too afraid to be even a few feet away from him. They approached the window and leaned over to see what was going on outside. Nothing. No alien troops, no massive conflagrations in the distance. Just a cloudy Virginia day. They were still bent over, looking, when the horn sounded again, rattling Austin's insides as if he were next to an amplifier at a concert. He covered his ears and looked up to the sky. The clouds turned black as nightfall descended again, no time for his eyes to adjust. By pure reflex, they both bolted away from the window. Austin reached out in the gloom and steadied himself on the end table near the sofa, holding himself there, waiting for his eyes to adjust. But his mother cried out and hit the floor with a thud. "Mom!" When she didn't reply, he frantically searched through the darkness, trying to feel for her, hold her again so that she would not die alone. After a moment, his hand touched a waft of her thin hair. He followed her hair up to her scalp, and there he felt an unmistakable warm and runny liquid. Blood. Chapter 9. They've arrived. Mr. Washington pounded on the door.
Austin? Are you in there?
Austin was sitting on the floor with his mother's head in his arms. Every time he removed his hand, blood leaked from the wound.
Help!
He shouted back, his heart racing in a panic. I need help in here!
Okay, I'm coming in. I'm using my spare key.
Within seconds, Mr. Washington was barging into the front hallway dressed in his militia clothes, green canvas cargo pants with a green button-down shirt.
Austin, what did they say?
Get Mrs. Armstrong, Austin said. Mr. Washington entered the living room, looking at Austin and his mother in confusion. Tell her to bring her nurse supplies, Austin added urgently. Go, quick! His mother stirred.
Harold?
She asked in a foggy voice. A wave of relief crested over Austin. He had no idea how hard she'd hit her head, but he took it as a good sign that she was recognizing people. If he could just get the wound closed, she would be in a much better place. Unfortunately, despite Mr. Washington's quick entry, he was still immobile.
Monica?
Mr. Washington asked.
What happened?
She fell when the sky went dark, Austin said, trying to maintain a semblance of patience. Now, can you please go get Mrs. Armstrong?
Okay.
Mr. Washington nodded, but remained still.
First, can you tell me what they said?
What? Who said? Austin asked through gritted teeth.
The robot. What did it say to the Pope?
He searched Mr. Washington's face, trying to detect if this was some sort of poorly conceived joke, but his expression was earnest. I don't know what you're talking about, Austin said, barely managing to suppress his irritation. Please, just get help for my mother. She's hurt bad.
Haven't you been watching the news?
Mr. Washington grabbed the remote from the coffee table.
You must be the only two people in the world who haven't seen it.
He attempted to turn on the TV. It's unplugged, Austin said, too dumbfounded at Mr. Washington's seeming lack of interest in his injured mother to tell him off. Mr. Washington shot Austin a puzzled look, but rather than ask any questions, he went over and plugged in the TV. The screen burst alive with a newscast.
That's where they came out.
Mr. Washington pointed to a live feed of St. Peter's Square in Rome. A silver cylinder occupied the entirety of the eastern portion of the square. It was unlike anything Austin had ever seen before. Smooth as glass and rising into the sky and out of the camera's frame, it dwarfed all the buildings around it, including the structure Austin recognized as St. Peter's Basilica.
The wall just folded away. There wasn't a hinge or a crack or anything. 1 second a solid wall, the next a giant hole where the alien came out. Never seen anything like it.
An alien came out? Austin said, scanning the screen. Despite being as smooth as a polished mirror, the cylinder did not reflect any of its surroundings.
Uh-huh. And you should see the ship the tower came down from,
Mr. Washington said, marveling at the live feed.
It must be a mile wide if it's a foot. It's made from the same material as that cylinder. It just dangles there in the sky over Rome, nothing more than a tether back to the mothership to keep it from crashing into the ground. Looks like a giant Hershey's Kiss suspended up in midair. These aliens have them over 12 cities around the world, including right up the road in D.C.
Austin noticed the Pope and several clerics sitting at an altar table on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica. Before he could ask Mr. Washington what the Pope had to do with any of this, his mother stirred in his arms.
Are we under attack?
She asked weakly. Her question pulled Austin's attention back to the task at hand.
Can you go get Mrs. Armstrong, please? This cut won't stop bleeding.
But,
Mr. Washington protested.
Fine,
Austin huffed, out of patience.
Stay here and hold my mom. I'll go get her.
Before he could get up, though, Mr. Armstrong charged through the apartment door.
Austin,
Mr. Armstrong said, breathless.
What do the robots say?
Mr. Armstrong, where's your wife? My mom's hurt.
Monica?
Mr. Armstrong gestured toward Austin's mom on the living room floor.
Is she okay?
She fell when everything went dark. Where's your wife?
She's down pulling the car around,
Mr. Armstrong said, still breathing heavily.
She wants to make a run for it. She thinks Pope Stephen killed the alien. I can't convince her otherwise. I thought you might be able to tell me what the robot said.
A robot? What are all of you talking about?
The robot spoke Latin, Austin.
Mr. Washington knelt on the floor and took one of his mother's hands in his own.
Then you said they're having trouble finding someone who can interpret spoken Latin. Isn't that your whole thing? Speaking it?
Austin couldn't believe it. The aliens were here, and they spoke Latin. The prayer they broadcast was not a one-off.
If you want me to translate, I need to hear what they said.
We'll have to wait for the news to do a replay.
Mr. Washington squinted at the TV in disapproval.
Right now, they're just showing the live feed of the square. You're such an old man, Harold.
Mr. Armstrong pulled out his phone.
It's already on the internet.
Mr. Armstrong propped his pudgy frame on the floor next to Austin, resting his back on the coffee table. The four of them leaned in close and trained their eyes on Mr. Armstrong's phone. For the first time, Austin laid eyes on one of the creatures that had instilled terror on Earth for the past 5 years. It was a long and grotesque thing, over 40 feet tall, even with its 3 legs bent and curled backward, as if posed in a kneel. It knelt a few dozen yards in front of Pope Stephen, who was holding a golden chalice in the air. As the Pope mouthed some words, the whole sky went dark, save for the altar, which was bathed in a light so bright that Austin thought it would sear the phone's screen.
We went dark at the same time here in Virginia,
Mr. Armstrong said.
According to the news, it happened each time the Pope did that thing Catholics do with the bread and the wine.
Austin could barely hear him. His attention was entirely focused on the alien. The 3 long, slender legs met at a torso surrounded by a skirt of tentacles that seemed to hide the part where the genitalia would be on a human. Each tentacle wriggled independently, like the chaotic motion of a centipede's legs. It was disgusting. But Austin couldn't look away. Directly above the skirt of tentacles were 2 eyes, and midway around the circumference of its torso were 2 holes where human ears would be. Austin concluded that this must be the alien's face, which was strange because the torso continued upward for another 15 feet, meaning the face was in the center of the body's mass, not at the top like a human's.
How much longer until the robot?
Austin asked.
Just a little bit longer,
Mr. Washington replied.
People on the internet are calling them Pilgrims,
Mr. Armstrong said.
They traveled across the whole galaxy just to go to church. What a name,
Mr. Washington laughed.
No way I can think of Turkey and the Mayflower when I hear that word now.
2 long, slender arms jutted out abruptly from the alien's side near the top of the torso. They were so thin compared to its bulbous body that they looked like the twig arms of a snowman. Each arm terminated in a hand made up of 3 fingers. Its skin was a pale white with gray shapes that appeared and disappeared in some sort of pattern. The creature was hideous, so unlike man, but Austin was mesmerized, his brain filling with questions. What kind of world would create these creatures? How had they managed to journey across the stars? Here it comes, Mr. Armstrong said. The alien began to writhe, its entire body moving in violent jerks. It fell to the ground in a heap, as if it were having a seizure. What happened? Austin asked, his brow furrowing. Why is it seizing like that? We don't know, Mr. Washington said. It looks sick, right? In an instant, the wall of the cylinder folded open and 7 robots came charging out. The robots were human-sized, about 6 feet tall and made from the same shiny metal as the cylinder. They were bipedal, with 2 jointless legs that connected to a shiny metal torso, elliptical in shape and devoid of grooves or features. The torso had 2 proportionate arms sticking out that terminated in a hand with 5 fingers. At the top of the torso was a faceless glass dome that glowed a deep crimson, casting a red shade on the darkened ground of the square as dusk set in over Rome. The robots moved rapidly across the square, so gracefully it looked like they glided rather than walked. 6 of the robots grabbed the alien, taking it back to the cylinder, while the 7th robot walked up to the altar and knelt, its domed head bent low. Beatissime Pater. Austin was taken aback by the deep bass of the voice, which sounded pristine, even on the phone's tiny speakers. Da veniam petentibus, missa dicta hic manias quaesu, mox redibo. How's the sound so good on this video? Austin asked, as he watched the robot glide back to the cylinder and disappear inside. Are you kidding? Mr. Armstrong said. Every microphone in Rome is pointed at those things right now.
What did it say?
Austin's mom asked, faintly, surprising him. It said, Holy Father, our most humble apologies. Please wait here after the Mass. I will return very soon. I told her, Mr. Armstrong exclaimed. I told her the robot didn't accuse the Pope of killing the alien. Okay, that's great, Austin said, as his mother stirred in his arms. Now, can you please go get your wife so she can help my mom? We could really use a nurse's help here. His plea finally seemed to get through to Mr. Armstrong, who got up. Putting so much of his generous weight on the coffee table, Austin feared it would give way. That wife of his, Mr. Washington said as Mr. Armstrong exited through the apartment door. She scares so easy. I tried to tell her that everything would be all right, that the world wasn't coming to an end today, but she just wouldn't hear it. As Mr. Washington's words sank in, a cold sweat pooled on Austin's back. The black shirts. They would be coming for him. The end of the world, no reprieve.
Monica!
Mrs. Armstrong called from the doorway, her nurse's kit in hand.
Oh, Monica, what happened?
She fell when the light went out, Mr. Washington explained. When Pope Stephen did the bread and wine thing at the Mass. Mrs. Armstrong gently nudged Austin aside and took over, supporting his mother's head. She pulled out a pair of nitrile gloves from her bag and began dabbing the wound with hydrogen peroxide as her husband hobbled back into the apartment. Dazed, Austin retreated to the sofa to get out of the way. Why's it taking so long for the news to translate, Austin? Mr. Armstrong huffed as he leaned against the wall. Austin stared. He'd counted on annihilation, almost like a fantasy, the only way he'd escape the consequences of his crimes. Austin? Mr. Washington prodded. What's wrong with you? What? The news, Mr. Armstrong said. You translated the Latin instantly. Why can't they do that? Austin took a breath, trying to compose himself. Most Latin scholars only ever learn to translate the language in its written form. Speaking is a whole other skill. I guess the news just doesn't have someone who can do it. You should work for the news, Austin, Mr. Washington said excitedly. I bet they'd pay you a lot. The sentiment hit Austin like a grenade. He finally had a marketable skill, but it wouldn't do him any good now. Look! Mr. Armstrong pointed to the live feed on the television. A robot had emerged from the cylinder and was approaching Pope Stephen, who was still at the altar. The robot kneeled, its domed head bowed low. Sancte Pater, Vicarius Christi, the robot said in its deep bass voice. Precipis apostolorum successor, pontifex supremos ecclesiae catholicae,
Humiliter te oramus ut nobis audientiam concedas. Neter nostrum, transemane paraturum spati et temporis frustrasi.
Austin, help us out, Mr. Washington said. Austin cleared his throat and began translating in real time. Holy Father, Vicar of Christ, successor of the Prince of Apostles, Supreme Pontiff of the Universal Church, we humbly beseech you for an audience so that our journey across the vast chasm of space-time may not have been in vain.
My goodness, Austin,
Mrs. Armstrong breathed.
You're amazing.
With the aid of two clerics, Pope Stephen rose from his seated position. Once standing, he replied as loudly as his raspy voice could.
Fratres in Christo.
Brothers in Christ, in the words of our Savior, ask and it will be given to you. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. The robot bowed even lower, touching its domed head to the ground, and spoke. Blessed Father, Austin translated, whatever is said unto me shall be heard by our brothers, for I am their emissary built specially for this world.
I get it now,
Mr. Washington said, his voice filled with wonder.
The robot. It's like some sort of diplomat. Oh, that's good, Mr. Armstrong said. I'm going to post that on the news forums.
Pope Stephen nodded and turned, shuffling up the steps into the basilica, the robot following behind.
Austin, it sounds like poetry when you translate,
Mrs. Armstrong said.
It's wonderful.
What does this all mean?
Mr. Washington asked no one in particular.
The aliens came to see the Pope? It's in the name, Harold. They're pilgrims,
Mr. Armstrong replied.
Does that mean we're safe?
Austin's mom asked softly, but with an unmistakable glimmer of hope.
I think so, Monica,
Mrs. Armstrong said, letting out an audible sigh of relief.
We're all going to be okay after all.
There was a crash at the doorway.
Austin DeSantis!
A voice bellowed, the words as coarse as bark. Two black shirts stood in the front hallway, rifles in hand.
What's the meaning of this?
Mr. Washington approached them.
We were just watching.
The black shirts stormed into the living room, shoving Mr. Washington out of their way. Hurtling backward, he raised his old arms to steady himself, but instead stumbled into the TV before collapsing to the floor in a heap. A final glimpse of the Vatican flickered on the screen as the TV teetered back and forth and then fell from the stand, crashing down on top of him.
Harold!
Mrs. Armstrong yelled. The two black shirts grabbed Austin, dragging him off the couch and slamming his face down onto the coffee table, perilously close to Mrs. Armstrong, who was still tending to his wounded mother.
Austin!
His mother screeched. Pulling his arms back, the black shirts restrained Austin with zip ties so tight he thought they would sever his hands. His arms secured, they hauled him to his feet and toward the exit, elbowing Mr. Armstrong as they pressed by. Before they took him through the door, Austin glanced back and caught a glimpse of his mother. A look of pure anguish was on her face, her worst fear having come to pass.